Hollow Earth Part 13. Another mystery occurred in 985 AD when the Viking explorer Eric the Red discovered Greenland. By 1410, there was anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 Viking colonists on the Greenland shores. That was the last date, however, that any one of the Viking settlers was ever seen again. All their villages were found abandoned, and their disappearance has become one of the largest unsolved mysteries in recent history. That is, if you ask the native people of Greenland, the Inuits. They suddenly went northwards to a wonderland that the natives had long known about. They called it the Land of Endless Summer, rich with vegetation and game. And according to their legend, these colonists were turned to a land of eternal bliss inside the protective womb of the earth. In the 12th century, an unusual story of underworld beings showed up in Suffolk, England, and it's still part of the town's history today. The children of Woolpit. Reapers in the area one day discovered two small children who had skin with a pale green hue and who spoke an unknown language. Running out of time. Part 14 next. Hollow Earth Part 14. So they found these two children who have pale green skin. Though they only ate raw beans, the boy soon died. But after years in declamation, the surviving girl soon explained that she and her brother came from a subterranean land where the sun never shone, and where the light was more like twilight, saying they'd become lost when they followed their cattle into a cave and emerged on the bright landscape. Next, in the 1908 book, The Smoky God, Willis George Emerson tells a story of Olaf Jensen's incredible journey to Agartha and the 2 years he spent there with his father. Jensen and his father were traveling in their small fishing boat in an attempt to find the land beyond the north wind, when a windstorm carried them through a polar opening into the interior of the earth. There they met who he called the Elder Race. Friendly, intelligent, lanky, 12-feet giants. He said later that they were able to grow tall in this unique electrical energy field that was always there inside the earth, and that these giants could live up to 800 years. Hollow Earth Part 15. Jensen described the inner world as warm, where it rained once a day, and it was filled with highly charged electrical air. There's a density to the atmosphere, he said, and this is what he believes led to the immersed vegetation there. The title of the book, The Smoky God, refers to the inner world's glowing and smoky sun. Most interesting was his explanation of these fast, noiseless flying objects on which he rode. He said they had revolving fan-like wheels which destroyed atmospheric pressure, or which he called gravitation. This force prevented them from falling from one side to the other. After spending 2 years with these beings in Agartha, Olaf and his father attempted to return through the opening. On the journey home, however, his father lost his life when an iceberg destroyed their boat. Jensen was later rescued by some fishermen, but when he shared his incredible story, they placed him in a madhouse for the mentally insane, where sadly he remained for 28 years. Not until he was 90 years old did he share the story of his life's journey with Emerson. Hollow Earth Part 16. So he told the story about Agartha, then they put him in a mental hospital for 28 years. When he was 90, he shared his whole life story with Emerson, giving him journals, diaries, maps, along with the manuscript of his experiences. Around the same time, in 1895, Nobel Prize laureate and Norwegian explorer Dr. Fridtjof Nansen set off an expedition to reach the North Pole. Nansen completely lost his bearings, admitting he couldn't identify the land at which he found. And that land's marked on the map of one of the best-known explorers simply did not exist. He had many unusual things happen as well, noting after bitter cold, suddenly the temperature began to rise, and it even became unbearably hot. He was never clear where Nansen was exactly, but as the expression goes, he was not in Kansas anymore. Hollow Earth Part 17 next. Hollow Earth Part 17. Deep in the Amazon jungle, the ancient Makushi Indians have remained isolated from advanced civilizations until very recently. They're said to be the guardians of an entrance to inner Earth, and they describe the journey as well as the beings there in vivid detail. They say for 15 days you have to travel through caverns until balls of bright light and glowing discs appear inside the earth. There's a civilization of very tall beings, 12 to 15 feet, who live in a lush ecosystem of vegetation. This primitive culture also speaks about how they encounter molten rock at deep depths. Now, without any modern education, how would they know that? Unless there is some truth to their story. After the First World War, a German occultist group funded the Thiel Society to pursue paranormal sciences. They publicize the Tibetan legends about openings into the earth, and they become obsessed with finding these entrances, with German emissaries even visiting Tibet. This is 17B, I guess. Here's a little video explaining the Makushi Indians more. I got the name wrong, spelling error, yeah.
Has any evidence been discovered that can prove the existence of a lost underground civilization? Historians have been debating this for centuries. Perhaps the answer to this question lies deep in the Amazon jungle, 2,500 miles south of Belize. An indigenous tribe known as the Makushi have lived here with little contact from the outside world until the mid-18th century. And yet, their mythology is almost identical to beings who protect the hollow earth described by the Mayans.
You have that South American tradition, which is very interesting, of the tribe that said that they were guarding the entrance to the inner earth. And they said it would take maybe a couple of weeks to finally get down far.
Hollow Earth 17C.
Said it would take maybe a couple of weeks to finally get down far enough where they would meet the inhabitants, and they were just these gigantic people, anywhere between 10 and 11.5 feet tall. So, of course, the common idea is that, oh, this is just a bunch of mythology by a primitive people. But what's interesting is they talked about how when they got far enough down, one of the things they saw was basically molten rock. And that's exactly what modern science tells us you should find underneath the earth. And how would a primitive people know that? There are also areas where there's all this lush plants and food and the people living down there. Can we take that seriously? We're left with this very interesting myth that has a few intriguing elements to it. It's worth a look if we can get down there.
The Mahaxi Indians of Guyana and also of the northern Amazon basin.
Here's 17D.
The Mahaxi Indians of Guyana and also of the northern Amazon basin have a very interesting legend concerning an entrance to the inner earth. And according to their legend, there is an entrance to the underworld there. And at one point, they were in charge of security over the entrance to this location. And according to their legend, they could descend into this world and come into contact with the very tall men who were basically giants, 15 feet tall, 12 feet tall. And they had been given this task of guarding this location and the entrance and not letting anyone else enter.
Traveling for 15 days down into this cavern until they literally put down their torches, because there's these inner balls of light that will light you the rest of the way on steps that are 33 inches long. Eventually making it into caverns where food was growing.
Part 17E.
Eventually making it into caverns where food was growing, lit by 4 large sun-like discs that they couldn't even stare at, they were so bright. And they describe the food as being apples the size of a human head, grapes the size of a human fist, interacting with giant beings that they described as being 3 to 4 meters in height, who would catch giant fish for them and give it to them as a gift. That kind of detail coming from a culture who didn't have any access to libraries, didn't have any access to television, satellite, internet. How is it that they come across or begin to tell stories that are being duplicated in all these other cultures? There has to be some truth to it. Now, whether it's completely hollow inside or whether or not these vast caverns are just there, I believe that they're there. And a lot of
Hollow Earth Part 18. This is crazy. So this group later endorsed what became the Nazis. As the Third Reich grew in military superiority and geographical dominance, Hitler actually ordered a team of researchers to go find the inner Earth openings. Later, a German U-boat commanded by Henrik Beran basically claimed that they had reached the interior of the Earth, and they even stated that they didn't want to come back. A diagram of Agartha was drawn by a German scientist in 1935. In corroboration with the U-boat navigator, these stories are backed up by maps made for the National Geographic Society in 1966. Here's the map. In that map, Antarctica can be observed without a thick layer of ice, but with the most interesting detail on the map are the underwater passageways spanning across the entire continent, which appear to converge at the exact location identified as the opening of inner Earth. Hollow Earth Part 19. Then there's the disturbing part of this legend where Hitler and many of his minions escaped Germany in the closing days of World War II and fled to Antarctica, where they basically escaped into Earth's interior. For it was after the war, the Allies discovered that more than 2,000 scientists from Germany and Italy, along with almost 1 million other people, had vanished. According to the Hollow Earth Research Society in Canada, this entire culture still resides there. Of course, they were not all Nazis, but for those guilty of heinous war crimes, a higher power will have administered justice. No investigation of inner Earth is complete without the unique story relating Admiral Richard E. Byrd, American aviator. He led numerous expeditions to the North and South Poles in 1947 and 1956. He wrote detailed logs with only facts about his journeys. What stands out about Bird's story, however, was the personal diary that his son published following his death. Hollow Earth Part 20. In his document, he basically gives vivid details about his expedition to the North Pole in 1947, the geographical anomalies he witnessed, which he couldn't make sense of. Being met by unfamiliar flying craft, they assumed control of his plane and then literally took him to their leader. Now, before you write this story off, it's important to understand the man who wrote it. Also, examine his behavior while he was alive. Richard Byrd was one of the most highly decorated officers in military history. Among these was the Medal of Honor, the highest medal given by the U.S. for valor. He also fought for the Allies in both World Wars and led 2 huge military expeditions to Antarctica following World War II. Here's him with President Truman. Byrd was an efficient, concise leader, and every trip he made, he kept detailed logs of just facts. He wasn't a poet or a storyteller, and the idea that a man of this rank and stature would fabricate stories is just unimaginable. Hollow Earth Part 21. You only need to see Byrd in his documentaries or his writings to see that he sought to live with integrity, that he understood the responsibility of his words and choices on the lives of those who reported to him, and our great nation which he served. So, when Byrd returned from his travels and was interviewed on the Longing Chronicles on live TV in 1954, the statements he made were and still kinda are confusing and mysterious. He would say things like this: "I'd like to see the land beyond the pole, the center of the great unknown." He didn't say to, around, or near it. He said beyond the pole. He called it the land of everlasting mystery, the most peaceful place in the world, in a vast territory not on any map. This talks about Byrd's expedition to the Antarctic. Here's the rest of this picture, but tell me that doesn't just look like a giant hole in the middle of the Antarctic. He said it was an area as big as the US, never seen by a human being. Those are the exact words he used. Hollow Earth Part 22. He literally said it's the most valuable and important place left in the world for science. Prior to another expedition, he said this is the most important expedition in the history of the world. And the phrase he repeated all the time was, "It's the center of the great unknown." These are mysterious when you consider that it's referring to either a large mass of ice or a landmass covered with ice. And to call it mysterious or peaceful, those are not the words that a strategic military officer would use. Come on. So I guess we also must conclude that as one of the nation's highest-ranking military, he was also sworn to secrecy. These statements still raise questions, though. Was Byrd upholding his vow to secrecy for national security, while being just truthful enough to share information that would allow him to abide by his principles of integrity? In February of 1947, Byrd made the statements, "I'd like to see the land beyond the pole, the center of the great unknown." Supposedly millions of people saw this in the newspaper and heard it on the radio, and you're gonna tell me no one thought it was weird? I'm calling Colin Kaepernick! Hollow Earth Part 23. So, did these people look at their globes? Like, what land was he talking about? If you look at the map, calculate the distance from all the known lands near it, and none of them are within 200 miles of the pole, and Byrd even called it no known land. That after 1,700 miles, he hadn't even reached the end of it. He should have been back to civilization by then, right? But he wasn't. He should have seen ice-covered ocean or the very most open ocean. Instead, he was flying over green, lush areas, including lakes and mountains. It was already published that he discovered 2 unknown land areas measuring a total of 4,000 miles across, and instead of receiving notoriety like Christopher Columbus, his story disappeared. Straight up vanished! Now, was Byrd trying to say what he knew without revealing it outright? Was anyone even paying attention? You're gonna tell me this high-ranking military officer came back with an insane story like that with no reason to lie, and his story disappeared the next day?